Good afternoon, colleagues. This PowerPoint presentation is to summarize the mediation done on MS Teams last week, 8 to 12 February. I hope this will assist you in reducing content, in planning what to do on your ATP. This mediation is meant for Term 1 only. Last year saw the COVID-19 pandemic giving birth to the circulars S2, the National Assessment Circular 02 of 2020, and Circular S3 of 2020. With the start of this new school year, we are now looking at circulars S11 and S13. Now, the main goal behind these two circulars are to retract, nullify, cancel the previous year's circulars, to provide guidance regarding curriculum recovery in 2021, and with them comes the release of the Curriculum Recovery Annual Teaching Plans that we are to implement from 2021 to 2023. That is correct here. Yes, over a period of 3 years, we are to catch up on what we lost the previous year. According to Circular S13, and that is point number 6 specifically, these multi-year recovery ATPs were developed taking the following into consideration: the learning losses that occurred during 2020 are to be recovered over the next 3 years. Opportunities are created by these new ATPs to strengthen pre-knowledge, consolidation, and to revise. Assessment for learning as a pedagogical approach are still with us and are to be implemented. And then they also considered that the learning and teaching support material of last year and the resources that we have already available. And I encourage you to use the learner resource packages that were distributed to your schools on USB sticks in 2020. In these resource packages, you will find complete folders. In that folder, for example, in the drama folder, you will find a PowerPoint presentation that will guide you in presenting a drama lesson. You will find a text, a lesson plan, a worksheet and a memorandum that the learners can use, and a set formal assessment task and a memorandum. So please go and look for those resource packages, take them out of the box and reuse them. The new ATPs also retained the core topics and fundamental skills. And very good news for most of us. The ATPs are now aligned to the assessment program. When you think back and you think of the start of last year's school year, you will remember that a new program of assessment was released, but we were still struggling with the old ATPs. They were not aligned to the program of assessment. That created a lot of confusion. Now we are blessed. Our ATPs are now finally aligned to our assessment program. In addition to this, more good news to you. The assessment requirements were changed. And very similar to last year, the June exams are to be replaced by controlled tests. You will also see that we now have less assessments. So this will allow more time for teaching. The ATPs were provided for normal conditions. It did not consider, however, the COVID challenges we are facing currently. What challenges am I talking about? Most of our learners come to school on alternating days or alternating weeks. Our time allocation was trimmed, and the allocated time in the ATP contrasts with the gazetted time for the reopening of schools. As we are sitting here, we already lost 2 weeks. And here is a short summary of how this will affect, this model of schooling will affect the content that we will be able to cover. If your learners come to school every second day, you can expect to lose 50% of your notional time. If they come to school every second week, you can also expect 50% of contact teaching time to be lost. And if they come to school 1 day a week, expect to lose 80% of notional time. This will pose a challenge because now we need to cover the ATP in half or 20% of the time. Okay, the notional times allocated to each subject stays as it is described by CAPS. Why? Because this is not a new curriculum. We are still busy with CAPS and we have to stick to the requirements regarding the notional times. That means the expectation is that we spend 5 hours on home language and 4.5 hours on first additional language. And we now know that we do not have the time because of the rotational schooling model. Thus, to address the ATP challenges created between the time available and the time allocations in CAPS, we need to make plans. Therefore, plan extremely well. Planning became of vital importance. Your planning should include planning for classroom teaching as well as planning for home learning. You cannot simply give homework for the sake of giving homework. In order to cover the essential key core knowledge, you will have to follow fundamental guidelines, and you will have to cluster or combine and integrate the learning areas in order to cover as much of the ATP as possible. The content that you decide on will vary from school to school, so the internal ATPs of your school will also differ from school to school because we are facing different challenges in different schools. As per DBE Circular S13, schools are instructed to adjust their ATPs, but I have to issue a word of warning. You are expected to cover maximum fundamental content per subject. Do as much as you can with the time that you do have available. If your school is not facing challenges, you cover every little aspect of the ATP. Utilize the time available very effectively per period. This means if you come to school, be well prepared and ready to teach. Children should not be sitting in a classroom working from a textbook. When they are in class, you should be teaching. It's also now vitally important that we manage home learning. Home learning becomes a tool in addition to classroom teaching to cover as much content as possible. Now, how should you manage home learning effectively so that it helps you to cover your ATP? First of all, plan your work in advance. You should not just plan thoroughly, but plan well in advance. And your planning should accommodate both face-to-face learning and home learning. Make use of learner management systems so that the communication channels are open. Learner management systems are systems like Google Classroom, YouTube videos, WhatsApp groups. It's important that you offer physical and virtual support to the areas which are self-study content areas. Use the flipped classroom method. What on earth is that? A new term. What does it mean? It means you should plan for home learning to establish background knowledge or to prepare the learning, the child for learning that will take place in the classroom, not to waste time. So, for example, a child can read the article or a story at home in advance to prepare for what you want to teach in class. Ubiquitous learning is also something new to us. It basically boils down to you need to enforce what was learned at class, in class at home, or what was learned at home in class. Very important is that we really support our parents. Provide your parents with an easy to follow resource pack that includes all the required information. Keep them informed, encouraged and supported. Please also take into consideration that language is one of 9 other subjects, so the work that you do give for home learning purposes should be a reasonable amount of work. Remember, this is not the only subject they have to deal with at home. The introduction of new content and teaching core and advanced contents, the introduction of new content and the teaching of core and advanced content is the teacher's responsibility. You cannot expect parents to teach advanced content. What you teach in class should enable your child to do the things he needs to do during home learning, or should enforce what he has learned at school. Home learning should enforce already taught content or prepare learners for content that will be taught in the next lesson. So think carefully about what you send home to be done at home. It should not be, you should really consider all the aspects and the necessity of the content that you send home. Okay, procedures to follow when planning lessons. When you need to plan to cover the ATP, you've got 4 main points there to consider. Number 1, you need to reduce the content and the topics to create space for quality teaching or deeper learning. So make the content list, but what you do have time to teach, do it properly, offer quality education. Prioritize what you need to do first, secondly, thirdly, etc. And how will you do that? Prioritize according to fundamental skills to include the key concepts, skills and values. What is the aim of the key concept, skills and values? To build the foundation for success in the next grade. Luckily, we still have access to the fundamental skills and context slide, and I will share it with you later on in this presentation. So you do not have to decide what the key concepts and skills are. We are going to give that to you. Cluster content around critical outcomes to ensure that all aspects of a particular topic are covered in a short space of time. Integrate, cluster, combine activities. You can, for example, offer an extract from a novel and do a reading comprehension on that, and even include some language in that lesson. Cluster content, it will save some time. Manage home learning to facilitate content coverage. Make use of home learning to cover content. So plan well, plan carefully. Just a reminder, what are the fundamentals again? The fundamental skills are listening and speaking, reading and viewing, writing and presenting, language structures and conventions, and they are familiar to all of us. And here is the promised slides. The home language and fall slides are exactly the same. The fundamental areas that you need to prioritize, or the skills, is listening and speaking, reading and viewing, writing and presenting, language structures and convention. When you look at listening and speaking, you need to pay attention to reading aloud. That is also the first oral that we are going to do in term 1 and in term 2, reading aloud. Just a friendly reminder, before we assess, we should educate, we should teach, we should offer some opportunities to practice the skills we are going to assess. So have them make reading aloud part of home learning, and to hit or to get two birds with one stone, they can read from their poetry or their novel or their folklore. Do listening comprehension as much as possible. We consider this a life skill. They will need to learn how to listen, how to comprehend what they hear, because this is a skill that will help them to be academically successful in future. So we want to see evidence of listening comprehension being done. And when we do listening comprehension, we must remember to ask questions from Barrett's taxonomy in all levels, not just level 1 questions based on the content, but also level 3 where they must infer meaning from what they read. And it has to include level 4 and 5 as well, evaluating and appreciation. Reading and viewing, here we've got reading aloud again. Make it part of home learning, please. And then we have response to texts, that's our reading comprehension. Do reading comprehension from literary texts. Use the poems, use the folk story, use the novel that you are doing as literature genres for this. Give an extract from one of those and do a reading comprehension. We would like to see non-literary texts being offered as comprehension exercises, reading texts for information or documentaries or newspaper articles, magazine articles. Do as many visual text exercises as you can, and you will find a lot in the resource packages, and practice as many times as possible the writing of summaries. We consider that to be a life skill as well for academic success in the future. As far as literature is concerned, in semester 1, that includes term 1 and term 2, the first thing you need to do is poetry. The second thing you need to do is folklore. And if you have time left in term 1, start with a novel or make it in some way part of home learning and continue and finish the novel in term 2. You do not need to cover the whole novel, page 30 to 50. You can do extracts from the novel. As far as the literature is concerned, it's very important that you expose the child to and teach him the features of the texts, the elements in a text, and should not just be content based. Writing and presenting, you will have to teach essay writing, and with regards to grades 7 and 8, it's the narrative and descriptive essay. With regards to grade 9, it's narrative, descriptive and reflective essays. You need to teach all 3 different types, but we know time is a problem, so stick to writing paragraphs, a narrative paragraph, a descriptive paragraph, a reflective paragraph. You can also combine this with literature teaching when you do The novel, a novel is a story, a folklore is a story. The elements and features of a story is that there's a plot, there's conflict, characters. Help the kids make the link to a narrative essay is a story. So in my essay, I should also have conflict, characters, etc., etc. It's also important that we see the process of essay writing at least once. And by the process, I mean teach them how to draw up a mind map and use it for planning. And I'm talking about a comprehensive mind map, not 5 clouds floating on the paper with one word in each cloud. Teach them how to make a proper mind map. Teach them how to write sentences from the keywords on a mind map. Teach them to combine these sentences in a paragraph to summarize something, how to write different paragraphs to organize them, how to edit them. You can give them a checklist with a punctuation, for example, and combine that with a language punctuation lesson. So writing is very important. Now we want to see the process of writing, and we also want to see paragraph writing and sentence construction into paragraphing. Transactional writing is still with us, and you will see that we have different types in the ATP. Please follow the ATP. Don't simply replace and chop and change there. Language structures and conventions are still with us. Dictionary use can be very effectively, apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Dictionary use can be done as a part of home learning very effectively. If you know that the child will be exposed to certain words, if you plan in advance, they can look up the words at home already. You can ask questions on those words like what was the language of origin, what is the root word, what's the meaning of it, can this word be used as a noun or a verb, can I change it somehow from a noun to a verb, can it be used as an adjective or an adverb, etc., etc. Use the word in a sentence. So make use of all the opportunities that you can to build vocabulary and to practice dictionary usage skills. Language conventions are still very much with us, and specifically grammar there, word levels, phrases, clauses, sentences, paragraphing. If you look at the phrases, the clauses, the sentences, the paragraphing, you can see how it will link with the writing that we expect you to do. Start with simple sentences, expand on those simple sentences by using phrases and clauses. Use sentences to write a paragraph and combine paragraphs as well. That also brings me to what I call linking words, like tomorrow, in addition, furthermore, in contrast. You need to teach the learners to use these words. It makes the writing sound fluent. And those words, ladies and gentlemen, are nothing new. They are in your CAPS document. And with this, I need to say to you, please visit your CAPS document regularly when you plan lessons. It really spells out what you need to do for you. First language, grade 7 to 9 is exactly the same as the home language, so I'm going to skip that now. In summary, regarding the content, what amendments, changes were made? Okay, and here is a summary for you. Kindly print this out. Keep this next to you. Your listening and speaking concepts that do not conform to the COVID-19 social distancing regulations have been removed or reconfigured. Therefore, there will be no dialogues, group discussions, forum discussions, role play, dramatization, and interviews. all discussions should be teacher-led. So there will be a lot of teaching from your side and a lot of listening from their side. Focus on listening comprehension. Here we have it again. Listening comprehension. Focus on that. Make sure that it is aligned to Barrett's taxonomy. Questions from all levels. They are not just expected to listen for content, but also to form an opinion and to evaluate something that they listen to. Focus on prepared reading, unprepared reading, and for the last semester, prepared, unprepared speech. This also implies that you will have to start soon enough teaching them how to write a prepared speech. And a prepared speech has a definite format. Make sure that you know what it is. Okay, there are 2 instead of 4 oral formal assessment tasks. Ladies and gentlemen, and this is good news, I'm going to repeat it. Instead of the usual 4, 1 per term, we now have 2 oral tasks. 1 formal oral done in term 1 and 2, that is the first semester of the year. You will start in term 1, preparing them, and you may start assessing some of the learners, and you will complete the process in term 2 and record and report those marks on essay SAMs at the end of term 2 for promotion. Then you will also be doing 1 oral in continuum in term 3 and term 4 and record it at the end of term 4 for promotional purposes. There should be evidence of informal or formative assessment activities on orals in the learner's scripts. I want to see listening comprehension in the learner's scripts. I want to see on your formal assessment task that you entered a text that is appropriate with regard to the length of the text and the time allocated, and that you prepared the learner, that he practiced the skills before you assessed. And I would like to see, with regard to speech, the speech that is coming, that you did speech writing and that the child knows what the format should look like. So there must be evidence of informal formative assessment activities on orals in the learner's scripts. With regard to reading and viewing, reading aloud has been changed, reconfigured to conform to the COVID-19 conditions, as we said previously. Implement this as part of home learning. Then very specifically, do 3 literature genres per semester. Remember, a semester is half a year. So in term 1 and term 2, we expect you to do the following. Start in term 1 with poetry, and I think the ATP makes provision for 2 poems. The second thing you do is folklore. Oh, and there's a spelling error. Folklore. You can choose which one you want to do. You can choose between a myth, a legend, a folk story, or a fable. But you do one of them, please. And if you have time left, you can start in term 1 with a novel or novelette. Please do not ask me if you can change the folklore to a short story. The answer will be no. This is policy. I cannot choose to change it, and neither can you. So first do poetry, then folklore, then the novel. Please follow the plan above. Learners will need the knowledge of this specific literature genres to prepare them for the creative writing project in term 3. If you follow your own head and do something different, you and your learners will be in trouble. So please follow the process that we advise you to follow. There is one response to literature test, and that will be administered in term 3, and all the grades, grades 7 to 9, will be expected to administer that test. Very, very important. The grade 9s that had a literature test in terms 2 and 4 will not write that tests. Now, it's something of the past. We expect the grade 9s as well to do only one literature test, and that will be in term 3. We are still busy with reading and viewing. There should be evidence of informal formative assessment activities on the reading and viewing, including comprehensions from both literary and non-literary texts. If you are a new novice teacher, literary texts used for comprehension means I take an extract from a story or a poem or a folk story or a drama or a novel, whatever, and I use it as a comprehension test. You will concentrate on asking questions to determine whether the child understands what he reads, and not literary-based questions if you use an extract from a story as a comprehension test. So I want to see comprehension tests from a literary text, a comprehension test from a non-literary text, from a magazine, a newspaper article, a text offering information, or a documentary. A lot of visual literacy texts and exercises, please. You will find many of these in your resource packages. I've seen a lot of them as well on Pinterest, a lot of cartoons, a lot of really, really nice stuff. Go and have a look. Practice summary writing as much as possible. Let them summarize parts of the novel or the folk story. So cluster your content to effectively make use of the time that you have available. What is important is that you can show evidence that you taught the learners. As from previous slides, we want to see evidence of orals, we want to see evidence of reading and viewing, and you will see later, we want to see evidence of writing as well. There are 3 responses to text's formal assessment tasks that the learners are expected to write. The one will be in term 1, and then we will have 2 of them in terms 2 and in terms 4. There should be evidence, once again, of informal formative assessment activities on reading and viewing. Can you see? We keep getting back to evidence, and by that we mean evidence in the learner books. Writing and presenting. All the writing and presenting concepts have been retained. Sentence construction, building up to paragraphing, should be emphasized. So we want to see a lot of paragraphs. Teach them to write sentences. Teach them to use sentences to build a paragraph. Teach them to use linking words to make their writing fluent. Once again, there should be evidence of informal formative assessment activities on writing and presenting. We want to see paragraphing, evidence that you taught that. We want to see essay writing. Remember the genres, the different types. We would like to see narrative paragraphs, descriptive paragraphs, reflective paragraphs. We need to see transactional texts that you did teach them. And here I would like to say the following. You do not have to have the learners write all the transactional texts following the whole process, because you will not have time for that. You can, for example, provide the learners with an example of a transactional text, like a pamphlet, and they can paste it in their books. You can ask them to bring pamphlets from home as well. Give them notes, however, on the format of a pamphlet, on the elements and features of a pamphlet. Have a discussion on what pamphlets are used for, and the role, for example, color and font and size of font plays in a pamphlet. Help them make the link that a pamphlet is an advertisement, and the link to ABBA. Can you remember ABBA? You have to attract, you've got to give attention. I can't even remember all the details, but go and revisit that and read it again. So provide the child with examples of all the transactional texts, notes on the format. You can combine it with a reading comprehension. You can combine it with language teaching, but we would like to see evidence of the teaching of transactional texts. Some of the texts you will have them write themselves after providing an example. Some of the texts will be used as language exercises, but you will teach the format of that text as well. And there will be an example in the child's book. There's one creative writing object in term 3, and it should be administered in accordance to the provided guidelines, which we will send to you. What is important here to note is the following. We want to see evidence of creative writing on different literature genres, because the child will use that in the those skills in the creative writing project in term 3. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you can show evidence of education that took place. There's also one formal essay assessment task in term 1, and there will be one transactional formal task in term 2, and one transactional formal task in term 4. And if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be a choice between either 2 short and 1 long text. As far as language structures and conventions are concerned, all the language structures and conventions concepts have been retained. Teachers are not expected to cover all of these concepts within a given cycle. That you know by now. Make sure that you cover at least 3 per cycle, indicated clearly on your ATP and in your lesson plan. But at the end of the year, you should have covered everything. The teaching of language structures and conventions should be dictated by the context. In other words, teach language using your literature genres or your reading comprehensions or your visual texts. It's very, very important that you teach language from a context. It must not just simply be a formal language lesson. That has its place, but that's additional to teaching language in a context. Teach language concepts found in the texts you are currently busy with. Language structures and conventions component is part of the response to texts, formal assessment tasks that will be administered in terms 1, 2, and 4. Once again, there should be evidence of informal, formative assessment activities on language structures and conventions. And here are different concepts mentioned once again. And we have dictionary usage. Can you see how important that is? Make use of every opportunity you can to identify abbreviations and teach them to the learner. Teach phonetics and phonology. Go and have a look at that again. It has an impact on your reading skills and even your spelling patterns. Morphology is important. Teach them about words, how to build words, how to change words, and help them with vocabulary development. And teach them from the texts you are using. The texts or genres you are busy will determine which language concepts you are going to deal with. Syntax, sentence structuring, very, very important. Semantics has got to do with meaning, homonyms, antonyms, synonyms, all of that. Figurative language, and then last but not the least, critical language awareness needs to be part and parcel of reading comprehensions and literature. So teach them the difference between literal and figurative meaning, how to identify manipulative reading, emotive language, all of that. Make sure that when you plan and prepare for lessons, you visit your CAPS document. It will spell out for you what you need to teach and how to teach it. The program of assessment for Term 1 looks like this. Before I continue with it, we cannot give you working mark sheets or spreadsheets since we haven't received the weightings yet. They are working. The National Department and SASAMS are working on that, and we will have to wait for that. We can also not give you a total per term at this stage. Please make sure that you do not postpone assessment. Start immediately teaching what you are going to assess. Assess when it's time to assess, and get it done. You never know what the future holds. Task 1 is an oral. It will be reading aloud for grade 7, 8 and 9. It will happen per semester, in other words, over term 1 and 2. You will start in term 1, finish it up in term 2 and record the mark at the end of term 2. Task 2 will be essay writing. For grade 7s, it's a narrative reflective essay for 30 marks. Grade 8s will be expected to write the same. Grade 9s has the reflective the descriptive essay in addition to that, and their mark allocation is 40 and not 30 marks. Once again, start teaching, start educating. Start with sentence writing and building up into paragraphing as soon as possible. The different characteristics or features of an essay. What is a narrative essay like? What is a reflective essay like? What is a descriptive essay? Please go and visit CAPS and make sure that you are sure of what you are teaching them. Task 3 is the response to texts, reading comprehension. For grade 7 and 8, the test will be for a total of 50 marks. There will be a reading comprehension for 20. You can use a literal or non-literal text. There will be a visual literacy question for 10 and language structures and conventions for 20 marks. Grade 9s, the total of that test will be 70. Your literal reading comprehension will be either a literal or non-literal text for 25 marks. A visual literacy question for 15 marks, summary for 10, and language structures and conventions for 20. A word of encouragement and appreciation. In case you haven't felt it today, you are truly appreciated. In case you wanted to quit, please don't. You are so needed. In case you need to talk but feel no one will listen, there are many who will. Please contact us if you feel like quitting, and we will assist and support you. In case you haven't heard it today, Thank you so much for the hard work you are doing and for educating the beautiful children of our country. Thanks again. If you have any questions, you will find my contact details on this slide. And that, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, concludes this PowerPoint presentation. Until we see one another next time.